Tiny Jackson, Policy Officer.
Okay, thank you everyone. We've got 1.5 hours for this hearing. So I'll start with some questions about the Island SEND review. So Minister, could you start by explaining what steps you are taking to address the review's finding that leadership, oversight and accountability arrangements for inclusive education are currently not sufficiently effective?
Yeah, well, first of all, I welcome the SCMD review. We commissioned it, and we commissioned it for transparency. That's why I gave the statement to the Assembly to questions. So, although some of the findings were challenging, we have to do that. So, we've made changes in inclusion leadership, including a secondment of experienced head teachers into the department to strengthen the collaboration between schools and the central team. That's one of the most important points. That perceived and probably real in some areas more than others, disconnect between central and team and what's going on in the schools, I think is now being repaired. And that's a really important part of this, of the response to SEND review. They are wide-ranging, the recommendations, but the focus on repairing relationships and that building of trust, I think, is a really important thing. Both trust for schools, trust centrally, and most importantly, trust for parents and children themselves is the way forward.
Okay, so with that focus on trust and accountability, you've mentioned the secondment of the head teachers. Is there any other main points?
Yeah, obviously the review is quite recent, so we'll be reacting to it. We're going to publish an immediate priorities plan by Christmas of this year. I think the draft is nearing completion.
That's correct, yes.
So that is the next step, I think, in that plan to move forward there, plus the things that we're already doing there. Anyone want to add anything to that? I think those are the two main areas. That's where the main response is going to be.
I mean, certainly we'll be outlining the immediate priorities, as the Minister has said. Central to that will be the governance structure and the external monitoring of the programme going forward, which are absolutely key to the success of this. So that first plan, which we'll publish before Christmas, will start outlining that, and that then leads into a medium-term plan over the next 3 years and a longer-term plan which stretches into the future, because in terms of the reform work that we need to do in this space, it will take a number of years, but we also want to be able to progress as quickly as we can and make sure that we have the right structures that we're delivering and make sure that we have the external review on that to basically sense check or to check what we're doing.
One of the things as well, we need to get a better map. That's probably a good word, actually. Map of the increasing need and where it is in our schools. And I do believe we've got better data management to do that. And I think, we launched an inclusion charter, which I think stuttered a little because we've had this SEND review. We need to look again at that, and that needs to be reinvigorated and make it more real and more in-school sort of focused. But there's even more than that, actual outcomes wise, so they can see what's actually happening. And I think the use of information that we have in our young people to map what's needed into the future helps us plan for the things that we see in the future. And as numbers change in our schools, I think that's more possible.
Okay, thank you for that. Minister, could you explain why the recommendations from the 2021 NASON review have not yet been fully implemented?
Well, they've not been fully implemented, and that's a really key thing. There have been things from the NASON review that have been put into place. So there are more additional resource provisions, ARPs across schools, there's enhanced safeguarding training, there's better training and recognition of SEND across the school, the formation of the virtual school, the RON matrix was restructured. I think that will be an ongoing process because things are changing so rapidly. There are other areas which have been happening, but NASON had a huge number of wide-ranging recommendations. And I think there are 2 points there. One is I wonder whether the nature of them was ever going to be achievable entirely without looking again, as we've done this time, at the SEND review. So I think what we've done now helps us to, if you like, reset that button on the NASON review and see where we're going.
Okay. So-
But sorry, just make point. Sorry, I just want to make that point. It wasn't entirely no recommendations were taken from the groups. Things have been acted upon, and I think it's fair for me to look previously to me and say nothing happened. They did, just not everything. You're absolutely right.
It's not that nothing happened, it's just that there are recommendations
Yes.
that haven't happened yet and haven't been acted upon.
Yeah.
Minister, how will you ensure there is greater consistency in the quality of SEND provision across all government-provided schools?
Well, one of the things is about collaboration and using good practice. One of the things that the SND review said was that there are pockets of very good practice across our schools. So we need to ensure that they become well known, they are seen, they are visible across schools, and that spirit, that attitude of collaboration is developed across our schools. This isn't about beating a school with a stick if they're not necessarily getting things the way that they want it to be. It's about supporting and using that support where it needs to be, where it's best used.
Okay,
And I think that collaboration across schools is one of the key areas in that.
So is there a plan for how to make that come into effect?
Yeah, I'll probably put my colleagues in here because there's a significant amount of work they're doing. But the Minister mentioned collaboration, which is very important. That enables schools to work together to drive the improvements forward. But centrally from the department, we have been pushing inclusive practice in schools, which is centred on inclusive teaching. So I don't know if you want to explain a bit more about what that is.
Yes, what we've been running is a series of workshops identifying best practice from other jurisdictions. We have worked with schools collaboratively to develop a new language for inclusive practice guidance, which is now being piloted and trialled across our schools. Head teachers and deputies have been part of those 3 workshops. They will continue over the next 2 years. And we're looking at what we provision for universal provision, the richer classroom experiences for all children, and a development of that common language will enable the collaboration across schools. We've already shared 3 case studies of how schools are launching this, and we move on to a next step then to look at targeted provision for children with identified special educational needs. So this is a clear programme over the next 2 years. We initiated this in the summer, and early signs are looking very promising. It's been well received by schools. Head teachers, deputies have been really quite enthusiastic in their response. Many have already started as early adopters. Others who have not yet had a chance to start have put it into their January inset training for their staff to launch then.
Is there a name for this programme?
Inclusive practice guidance.
Okay.
I think you've got some questions on the school review coming up, but I think that's an integral part of what we're doing as well. The nature of the school review and the way that will work to improve schools, not just label schools, which I think is really important, but we'll come to that.
And Minister, how will the voices of children and young people with SEND, as well as their families, be incorporated into the development and monitoring of strategy? How much are they being listened to? And
Do you want to answer that? Because I'm coughing, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I can start off with the first part and then maybe Matthew can come in, particularly around school review. But I mentioned earlier about governance arrangements, and we want to ensure that we have the voice of parents and children feeding through that process as well, but also through school review. We monitor feedback from pupils in schools as a major part of that.
The use of pupil voice in the new 2025 Jersey School Review is absolutely at the heart of the evidence gathering that we do. As part of the Island SEND review recommendations, it's also part that we would, in terms of our plan and our immediate priority plan, is to increase pupil voice, making use of the organisations that we already have and structures there. So there are a whole series of plans for how we can enable and working impact collaboration with schools, get that feedback from pupils and parents.
Yeah. And can I add, we mustn't forget what I would call business as usual in schools. Every single day there are interactions between young people and teachers and parents with different levels of need within our classrooms that are just part of that good practice. And often if a child who may have a particular need but is succeeding, getting on in class, a particular class or a particular school, those things are really discussed, parents even, or when parents drop their children off. So that is often not seen. I think we emphasise when we could do more, but the business as usual part of that is really important. And I want to say that publicly because I want to credit teachers for what they do day in, day out, often above and beyond just everyday teaching. And I think that's really important to recognise as well.
And of course, when asking about the parent and child voice, there's no suggestion that there's anything not being done well by teachers.
But we want to do it better, yeah.
So you mentioned about the school review and the efforts
Yes.
to hear the parent and child voice through there. But is that to do with how often does that happen? Is it the review of every few years or?
The reviews, of course, go on a 3-4 year cycle.
Yeah.
Our surveys we use in those are actually published as part of the reviews. There are an appendix there. We're encouraging schools to do that pupil survey themselves. We're also, as part of our, when the immediate priorities plan comes out, part of that will include about how we anticipate to use the participation standards going forward to survey pupils and family and get their voices in our strategic planning going forward, the ongoing monitoring of the work as we respond to the Island Send review. So it's not wholly on the Jersey School Review, but because the Jersey School Review has such a focus on inclusion in its new iteration, it's offering us a good model to start from.
Of course, with the surveys, how often do they happen at each school? Can you?
Schools typically do their own annual surveys.
Annual surveys. Okay.
We'd also want to, as part of that consultation, is consult via youth services, the school council network, youth parliament. There was a great example of how youth parliament fuelled some really strong additional guidance and support for the PSHE programme recently. There's models that we have to replicate.
And I think as well we need to point to this point that the SEND review said, which was that often there is developed a culture of complaint, and we need to move away from that to a culture of cooperation and collaboration rather than complaint. And I think that's where the steps will be, and that's where that voice is. And I think that's where we recognise what happens every day and frequently in our schools, emphasise that, and then that trust of parents say, things aren't going well, I know where to go to, I can talk to my classroom teacher first, I can talk to the school first, and 99% of the time the problem's solved. I know they care about my children. That's a really important part of this.
Okay, so with all these plans that have been mentioned, you've also talked about a 2-year programme and so on for some of this, because I was going to ask about the timeline for implementing the review's recommendations, but is that the sort of expectation over 2 years generally, or no?
No, I think the initial immediate plan is over the next 6 months to a year. We plan around Easter time to publish a 3-year plan, and then we will have a longer term plan which is up to 7 years. 7 years, because some of this will take quite significant work, but we want to show the progress that we're going to be making through those plans.
And will that include a way to measure the progress as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
And be reported.
Yeah, without a doubt. So it's absolutely essential we understand how far we move on this. So having outcome measures that we agree at the beginning of the programme that we share and that we're then monitored and held to account by, it's got to be in place. So we'll be obviously talking about those.
Made public as well.
Yes, that will be made public.
Can I just say as well, when we do that, we need to be transparent and open. If some of those outcomes aren't happening, last thing we want is a tick box exercise and say, we're okay. This is what's happened before. This is what happened now. And I don't blame schools for this because the culture has been, you could be in trouble here. That's not what the review system is like now. It's about self-improvement, openness, honesty, professionalism. And we have that professionalism there. Let's let it flourish and let's let it do its job. That's what I want to see happening in our schools.
Okay, now I just have a question which is about the transition. So could you outline, Minister, what funding and support is currently available to assist young people with special educational needs and disabilities in their transition into further education, training or employment after the age of 18?
After the age of 18, well, yes, there is a gap there. There is support in Montalabé and in Highlands. Do you mean when they go to university, when they
Well, for anything that they need to do, once they reach the age of 18, I think in the UK there's a plan to support them.
Yeah,
Continuous
okay. Anyone who-
education if that's what they want.
Yeah.
So do you think that the current support is sufficient here?
Yeah. Support with post-18, sorry. It has been a priority since the Nation Review. Looked after children RONs over the last till they're 19. So the children who are looked after are RONs of 19. Also, children in care leavers have a provision till 25. I personally think that's the way we should be going with our RONs, or whatever the RON becomes. They're changing in the UK, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, and I shouldn't try to remember because it's overloaded my brain. I can't remember what they're calling them now.
EHCP.
What are they called?
EHCP.
That's it,
And
yeah.
as is a record of need on it.
Yeah, although I think there's some issues with those. There's good practice in Montalabby, as I said, in Highlands. I will say the problem is ongoing as well, but it's not good enough at the moment, absolutely, and we need to look at the ways in which we can support that. Do you want to add anything to that? Because I'm missing gaps in our provision.
No, I think we have provision around the youth service as well, but it's
Yes.
certainly in terms of transition.
Yeah.
Okay, so is this an area that you're going to be looking at?
Yeah, 16 to 18, I think we have support still in schools and in colleges because it's
18
part
to
of what we do. Post 18, if students go off to university, universities have lots of support mechanisms in place now. They do, and that's been a huge improvement in universities, I've got to say, over the last 10, 15 years, probably longer than that. And we've made some provision for online learners with OU, do some really good support. If you take a degree with the OU, they support really, really well. So there is support out there, but it could always be better, I think, because it's such a specific to need. We do fund that additional support in universities when applications are made, which could be 1 or 2 hours a week of one-to-one support while at university. That provision is changing because the rules are changing in the UK, and we've had a few appeals on that, which we've upheld, and we're trying to provide support where we can.
Yeah.
You've talked about the students that are going off to university, but for those students who are at Montalabby, that with intellectual difficulties, that would, for example, be transitioning into Highlands.
Yeah.
What is the provision that's currently available at Highlands for those transitioning from Montalabby?
There's a lot of support from Highlands, the Highlands team. What are the Highlands team called?
The pathways.
Pathways team, for example. So there is support at Highlands.
Up until what age?
Up until 18, 19. I would say up to 19 because
that's what the law says.
yeah, that's what the law
The
says.
challenge with comparisons with the UK is the record of need, or the EHCP in England, would run to 25 because our compulsory education finishes at 16. Our provision extends to 19 for young people with a record of need. So we currently don't fund Highlands or Montalabby to support children past the age of 18, 19. And that's the area that would need to be developed.
So in terms of young people as well, some of the stories that we hear is that, you're providing an education provision up at Highlands, but not necessarily any kind of social support. So whereas you've got young people being picked up to access their education at Montalabby, suddenly they don't have the means of actually accessing Highlands. They don't have support during breaks. They don't have support during lunch hour. So what
surprised at that.
What are you doing to facilitate that?
I'm surprised at that because there is a very much a wellbeing team in the Highlands and a support team there.
But in terms of transport, for example,
Transport's more challenging, I'm sure.
Again, it will depend on the record of need.
Yeah.
So the record of need should be reviewed annually and would define the level of support and need that young person needs, and depending on the level of disability, depending on the transition. So what we have seen is that 10 years ago there was very little need for a sixth form provision for young people in the Montalabby space, and young people would have transitioned mostly at 16. We've now got a high level of need in our special schools. And so so the first things that's changed is we've got young people in the 16 to 19 space in Montalabby, and that's reflected in the new build. We built a sixth form centre 18 months, 2 years ago opened, I think, a little bit longer. And that was needed because of an emerging and different need.
Yeah.
The level of need that Highlands are supporting is impacted by those young people staying in Montalabé, but the level of need across the piece has continued to rise. So it's being aware of, but the
So
level of
what-
need
so
per
what-
family should be done through record of need,
So
and then
what-
it would be done by case by case.
So what plans have you got to make sure that they're not dropping off a cliff at 19 in terms of education and getting something delivered until they're 25?
So this is more about cross-service working. So
absolutely.
there are working groups taking place with children's social care, with health, so that we're working together collaboratively to ensure that as young people transition from an education support system to an adult support system, that those safety nets are in place and that partnership working is in place.
And are you confident that that's going to be successful?
I think it can be successful. Yeah, there are successes already. I know of students who, someone I used to teach actually, I was speaking to one of their mums the other day who's successfully working now, full-time job, has gone through that entire process, is doing really well. And part of that is also the support from employers, and we have to work on that area as well, because we
There
need...
will be a cohort of people
Yeah.
that will never be in employment.
Well, there will be, but there will also be a cohort of people who could be in employment if they're given support by employers, and I think as an island that's something we could improve
But
with
we
as
have
well.
Jersey Employment Trust.
I was about to say with the Jersey Employment Trust would be the support, would be part of that
Yeah,
partnership
absolutely, but
working.
it could...
And how closely do Highlands work with the Jersey Employment Trust, because they're based up there as well? So
There are connections all the time.
Yeah.
It's done on the numbers are relatively small, so it's done on a case-by-case basis, and you'll find really quite bespoke packages emerging depending on the type of need that the young person has.
I think they are, you're right, the word is bespoke. Each person is individual and have to be met individually, and that can be very different, and they're also different over time with maturation.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you. So we've just been talking about records of need, which is my next question. Minister, have there been any changes to the criteria for establishing a record of need, or to the processes for supporting, reviewing and evaluating record of needs in line with NACEN 2021 recommendations, which was for greater transparency and expanded SEND and inclusion team involvement?
Yes, it's a very long question. The simple answer is yes. Do you want to detail some of that for me?
So two different streams of work have taken place. We've
Coffee, yeah.
the main one is that we did a trial for a year and a little bit of the EHCP template, which we joined in alongside the English trial. So a number of local authorities across the UK trialled a new mechanism. We joined that trial, and alongside the UK analysis was that didn't work as well as they'd hoped, and they have stepped back from that pilot. We have also stepped back from that pilot. And we are just in the process. We did a full survey of all the families. There were 19 families involved in that here. All of them were surveyed and gave feedback alongside professional schools and others relevant. And that an evaluation is now informing how we're moving forward. So it's been iterative, but involving parents, involving young people's voices, and with the professionals as well.
Well, that's good. And the feedback you got, was that positive, mixed, not positive?
Yeah, so I mean, the main changes that pilot has brought in is the raising of the profile of the parent voice, and placing. It was there in the code of practice, but what the new form did was create sections specifically for family voice, child voice, and that will definitely be maintained on whatever the new RON, how the RON develops. That part will be front and centre of what we do moving forward.
Okay, and do you know when you might have something ready that's
So it-
ready
so
to
it-
go ahead? And
So it's integrated into the process around the SEND review. So as we publish that report, those revisions will be part of that,
okay.
and the timeline attached for that work.
will there ever be a point when the record of need, or ECHP, whatever you're going to call it, is statutory in Jersey?
That's a really good question. My answer would be at some point, probably the answer is yes, but what form that will be
It is
is
statutory.
yeah.
No, it's not.
Are you talking about the new, whatever changes we make?
It doesn't. There's no. It's not a statutory thing to have a record of need, and it doesn't automatically come with money. It doesn't have the same status as it does in the UK.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yes, I think that's a sense. Well, there's two things there. Yes, that looks very good initially, and I would sit here and say yes, but you have to be careful as well that you therefore don't chase the money with a record of need, which is what's happened in the UK a great deal. And I think we have to be very, very careful. We want something that works to provide the best we possibly can for our young people. Yeah, if that comes with money, that's great, but that's not all it's about. It's about that support, understanding that child, understanding the relationship with the family and including the family in that. Often helping the family as well, because there are challenging circumstances, you know, especially as children get older. Yeah.
I'm going to move on to some questions about Gerrier.
Okay.
Could you just tell us how Gerrier is currently integrated into both the primary and the secondary curriculum, and whether you've got any plans to expand its presence in core subjects or extracurricular activities?
Well, Gerrier is taught mainly in primary schools. There is a history to that, because the first 5 years of the Gerrier project was about bringing teachers who will be delivering the teaching up to the standard with their language acquisition. So that has been a process as well. That is the foundation we have to remember as well. So it's delivered in Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3. In Key Stage 4, it tends to be in small groups, one-to-one, lunchtime and after school classes. And in Key Stage 5, one-to-one, lunchtime and after school. It's not an integral part of the curriculum or into the curriculum at this stage. But I think as we come up with the new plan for Gerrier, which should be implemented by next, or should be starting next
During
year,
2026.
then that's one of the areas that which I think we need to look at. I think we need to, the focus needs to be on we need to decide where our focus is going to be. We employ teachers to teach, and we want them to teach Gerrier. How you incorporate that into the curriculum-wide, I'm not a language specialist. I couldn't tell you how to do that. I think back, how would I have done that in science? We get to the token gesture of keywords, which I suppose is a start. But I would encourage that, but it's just a question of how we do that.
Okay, thank you. What measures are currently in place then to ensure that there's sufficient qualified teachers to deliver the range of Gerrier lessons across the schools?
What measures were in place? Well, there are 5 teachers employed on teaching contracts. So they are employed as teachers on the teacher scale with teachers' pensions, etc., etc. And they have timetables in schools. I think we need to maximise that teaching timetable. And I think over the last few years there has been a sort of perhaps not a clear delegation of what is the teaching and what is the other cultural areas, and we've been discussing how we can make that division clear so we can free teachers up to teach, which I think is really, really important, particularly as they've gone forward the work of language acquisition and planning, and there's a lot planned now, so there are a lot of lessons available in our schools, so that we can increase the contact time of that teaching. And then the other areas, which are perhaps more cultural, we can define perhaps in other areas away from just strictly the teaching.
It's a tricky balance, isn't it?
It is.
You know, because if you're teaching French or Italian, you have resources at your fingertips that you can buy from Amazon or anywhere else. So,
a lot have been developed over the last few years. I mean, we have a lot that's developed over the last few years, and there's some other things. Yeah.
So what professional development opportunities exist for the Gerrier staff?
Do you want to answer that, Rachel, in terms of? So we've. Go on.
So the Gerrier team, all of the teachers have a weekly language lesson with the colleague who is the most fluent in Gerrier. So they have a weekly language lesson. It depends on their fluency and on how much time they spend on that. They also go to conversation lessons. So in terms of their language development, there's that. They've also worked very closely with the French experience, which we continue to run successfully on Ireland in terms of language pedagogy. So in terms of how they resource the lessons, how they plan lessons, that sort of crucial approach to language teaching of recycling and introduction of new concepts, new vocabulary, what a good resource looks like, which is age appropriate. One of the challenges when we started early on in the Gerrier, it wasn't that there was no teaching resource. There was. There's been Gerrier lessons for adults for years and years and years, and there was a well-established. It wasn't a accredited GCSE programme, but there was a well-established and well-resourced GCSE level programme available, but what it wasn't was appropriate to teach in schools to young people, and it certainly wasn't appropriate to teach to primary school children. So the development of appropriate lessons by so the Gerier teachers who work in primary schools are qualified and experienced primary school specialists. So they weren't initially trained in Gerier, they were trained as primary school teachers, and then they apply their Gerier learning to their best practice, supported by linguistic specialists. So they have language CPD, they have language acquisition CPD, and then they also have good connections with the Office de Gerier and with the team working out of Jersey Heritage. So that sort of broader cultural piece and the development of the corpus of language. So the lead colleague is constantly working with those specialists in the heritage team, creating that language which then is disseminated out to the team.
Where is the Gerier team based then? At Education or at Heritage?
They're based in the Highlands building. They're largely peripatetic. So essentially, when most of education moved to Union Street to town, colleagues who are peripatetic, who spend more than 50% of their time in schools, it's more appropriate for them to be based where they have a base where they can put their resources, but then they'll do a morning in one school and then go to a different school for the afternoon. So where they're based is in island schools. That's where you'd want them to be if they're employed as teachers.
Okay, thank you. UNESCO has classified Gerier as a severely endangered language. So what role does the education system have in its preservation? And how is that aligned with the broader kind of Jersey language policy for education?
Well, the teaching of a language is, I suppose, fundamental to that language existing. So the process of training teachers, I think it's that the real difficulty is not just that we have language and people speak the language. It's how we're going to ingrain that in the teaching of it for young people and further on. To do that, you have to have skills to teach. So we've taken teachers, got them to become Gerier teachers, and they are delivering that as lessons in schools. So that's the most, I suppose that's what the main part that education can the role of education in terms of as a department, as our teachers can play in that, in the delivery of teaching of that language. The heritage part, this is where we have to get the balance right and how that happens. And I think it fits in with our wider language policy in the same way, the delivery of good quality lessons in a language, which is what we want to do, to enrich people's experience of that language and give them the opportunity to learn it. We do have a problem that there isn't a qualification.
When are we going to see the GCSE if we've got all these GCSE resources?
And we've tasked the team to work on that. We've tasked the team to work on accreditation, whether we go with the GCSE or whether we go whether we go with the European language approach, which may be more appropriate. The GCSE requires that the 4 areas of speaking, listening, reading and writing. It may be more appropriate to focus on speaking and listening for Gerier, particularly for younger people. I think the balance is the extent to which we want to produce resources and lessons for young people and children and for adults. Because again, in the protection of an endangered language, there's a great value in ensuring there are adult speakers alongside growing new speakers.
And I think
and following people's passion.
Therein lies one of the challenges, because obviously CIPES, you're focused on children and young people.
Yeah.
And there just seems to be some tension between what is happening for children and young people and what's happening in the broader community, and I guess that comes in as part.
I wouldn't call it tension. I think tension is the wrong word. I think everyone's trying to work really well together to get how they can do that, and we certainly have a lot of support from, Heritage to deliver what we deliver, to enrich it and so on. I don't think it's telling. I think it's just delineation of what you're trying to deliver, and this might just be me with my education and teacher head on. But if I'm a teacher, I want to focus on that teaching delivery, be clear as to what I'm doing, clear on what I'm delivering. A qualification may help with that, not necessarily GCSE, I would say. It may be more like the DELF qualification in France. I have my DELF qualification, just to put that in there. I'm very proud of, that type of qualification might be useful. So I wouldn't call it tension. I think it's just clarity of roles and clarity of what people are doing. Because if we get that right, you can help deliver each one, and you know where to go when you want something.
So the Gerier strategy has just run out at the end of 2025. How close are we to getting the 26 to 30?
Yeah, it's being worked on now, I believe, and finalised. I think that there's a step on the new strategy, because remember the first strategy had to focus on the teachers themselves' language acquisition. And I think that is ingrained in terms of how that happens now. I think I'm right in saying that. It's really clear that if you're a teacher and you want to become a GREA teacher, there's your pathway to do that. So now the strategy can move on to look at the type of things you're talking about. What are we teaching? How are we teaching? What do we want the outcomes of that teaching to be? And also, where is that delineation between that and the other cultural areas, such as, there's music and, I don't want to say black butter making, but, that type of heritage stuff that goes around it. If we get that clarity in that plan, I think it'll make it easier for everybody. And it'll also make it easier to say where the money's going, where the funding's coming from, and who's responsible. Because I think that if there is any tension, and I don't like that word, I think it's just... When you're trying to look at a language that really has been in a bad place for a long time and you're trying to get somewhere with it, it's not easy. And any small steps are big steps. We need to recognise those. So you've got to be fair with the strategy as well. If it hasn't been 100% where we want to be, there are reasons for that. So now we build on what we have.
So in terms of sustainability and growth, would it be your plan to retain the teaching of GREA within SIPES, or would it be to move the teaching of GREA to heritage?
That's the good question. I think in terms of the teaching, at this moment in time, I think SIPES is the best place for it because they are in teachers' contracts, they are employed as teachers, and we know what that means.
But other departments employ qualified teachers to deliver that are not necessarily under SIPES.
And that is a conversation that needs to happen longer term. At this moment in time, I think if we get the clarity of what the teaching entails, what it means and what it will look like, let's get that structured first and make absolute clarity on where we are. Then, to be quite frank, if we decide in the coming years that it doesn't have to stay here, it might be better in heritage, everyone needs to be open to that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not precious about it. Yeah, it needs to be in the best place. But at the moment, I think with the changes we're making and where we've gone to, we've got a structure there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The next topic, ladies and gentlemen, is about the school reviews.
Yeah.
What are the key changes, Minister, if any, made to the Jersey Schools Review framework following the analysis and consultation period in 2024-25, and how will these changes improve the review process?
Well, there's a couple of things, and then Matthew can speak at length at this, but we won't let him go on too long. I mean that in the nicest possible way because it's so deep.
Thank you,
ingrained
Minister.
in it.
Are you saying, Minister, that he goes on?
No, that's what I mean at all. I want to say one thing. I want to say first of all is that we are not grading schools. We are not grading lessons, and I absolutely support that. Because you cannot sum up a lesson or a school in a single grade. I think if you do that, you miss the point, and that's what we've done as the most important point and the headline, and that's the end of it. This is a more in-depth process. So the biggest change is that there's a new definition of the curriculum with 4 pillars: the development of the child, entitlement, equity, and quality, which I'm sure Matthew will be pleased that I know off by heart now, and that is a step forward. Pilot reviews have taken place and there has been learning from those. I think what's happened is we've got a stronger focus on, and I've written down quality, breadth, and the challenge of the curriculum and the personal development of pupils. That fits in with what we're doing around SEND, but not just that, but around the nature of our schools and the differences between our schools. So that we see every school as the place where individual pupils can develop to their utmost. And that's what we want to do. But it's a supportive framework. The handbook is no longer written for external inspectors and reviewers in the Ofsted style. It is, but as a resource for school leaders and teachers to underpin self-assessment and school improvement planning. Now that's a lovely phrase, and I know as an ex-teacher we've got some way to go to get that cultural change accepted, because teachers have been through years and years of not having this, and I'm sure there would be teachers who will say, yeah, you say that, but, and I mean it. I want this to be a self-assessment process. I want it to be a process where that professionalism can shine through and be open about the discussions that I had after those reviews to make improvement. Matthew, you must be...
The handbook changes are quite significant. So we've demystified the process. We put in the kind of thinking and questions that any reviewer will ask in different scenarios. So what goes through a reviewer's head when they walk into a lesson, when they are having discussions with pupils and so on. Building on that from my own background in Ofsted, but in terms of the work that we did, head teachers asked for this so that they could support their staff, so it will support their ongoing monitoring, so that it doesn't come as a surprise every 4 years. It very much, the style that we've adopted is that schools are the engine of self-improvement. The review process comes every 4 years to hold up the mirror to say, where are you at in that journey? Yeah. And the whole handbook, as the Minister says, I could talk too long on this, so I won't, but the whole handbook is not just a book. It is a series of process and training that we've engaged with heads and deputies. There's been a whole package of professional development for subject leads, and that ongoing process that we're working with, even support for school business managers with their areas of safeguarding that they would do, how we support schools continues. This is a really important part of the process.
Let me ask another question. How will the department ensure that the up-and-coming 2025-29 review cycle is delivered consistently across all Government of Jersey schools, and what measures are in place to support schools in preparing for these reviews?
Right. So in terms of the measures that are in place, the handbook itself and the process was co-produced and co-designed with school leaders as we went through that iterative process and as we developed and piloted. There was feedback after the pilots and how we've updated the process from the feedback from the 5 schools, which we're incredibly grateful that participated in the pilots. That changed not... because we did a collaborative co-production, the what in our benchmarking approach rather than grading approach. So what we were benchmarking, there were minor changes to some of the text, but significantly we had got most of that right, which is really important. We were delighted with that. But the how we approach the benchmarking process and how we structure has evolved as a result, and it evolved during the pilots too. I was involved personally in all 5 pilots. I quality assured them. As we have rolled out now, our first Jersey School Review 2025 went live with JCG and has now been published. I have said to head teachers, I'm personally on site quality assuring every off-island lead reviewer's first go at delivering the Jersey School Review. Even those who led some of the pilots, I'm still there quality assuring it because of that evolution and iterative process. That ensures the consistency. I can't be there on all of them. But as we develop that programme, we also have a programme of quality assurance of the writing for the reports. We have a quality assurance process and training for our peer reviewers, who are our heads, deputies, senior leaders in schools who join the process.
What about the mechanism for public reporting, though, and follow-up on recommendations? And how will progress be monitored between the review cycles?
So the subject to the review and the benchmarking discussions. Sorry, Minister.
No, you carry on. Just as I find the right page, carry on. I was going to mention just one thing before you answer that. It was interesting recently, we had a cross-nation summit and we talked about our review system, and there was a huge amount of interest in what we're doing. Genuine interest, because it's a cycle and a process that includes schools and is self-improving. You know, one of the first determinations, and you'll remember this about Ofsted, of a school that was very good, or a department, was it was a self-improving department. So that came very early, but then Ofsted didn't really get to the stage of allowing that to happen, in my view, somebody who's been through it. But this is an integral part of what we're doing, and I think that's really important. And that's I can answer the question regards how we evaluate. So there are accountability measures in schools. There are monitoring and self-evaluation annually. A school that is self-evaluating honestly and openly and professionally with its staff is a good school.
But what about with the public, Minister?
So we don't publish grades, but we do publish reports.
So the reports are all on gov.je.
Yeah.
So the school's latest reports are all on gov.je.
That's one of my questions.
If we had concerns with safeguarding, we would come back and do a further monitoring visit. We may also, and we do monitoring visits if we have in the previous review, if we had some worries around one of the 4 key areas that we make a judgment on, we'll come back. Those monitoring visits are not published. They are shared with the school, they are shared with the senior advisors, they're shared with the department, but they are not published because we don't grade schools. So the only reports that monitoring visits we publish is a safeguarding, because in the parental interest, is that school safe? And we have published those in the past. The danger is when you've got a non-grading system, publish monitoring, not every school will get monitoring. And if it needs monitoring, putting that in the public arena is important. But we would use that information and this next iteration of the Jersey School Reviews is not going to go in the same order that the last one did.
That's that. If I may go forward to my next question, as the reviews are undertaken on, as we know, on a 4-year basis, would you consider regularly publishing a schedule of reviews planned for the year ahead? In other words, tell the public.
No.
That's key. Thank you.
And the reason we don't want to do that is it's just simply so that we don't have schools planning for that cycle. That is not this process. That's what happened. If Ofsted published and you were given 6 months ahead, you would spend that 6 months purely getting ready for that review.
You're marking your own.
I've been in a school in the UK and done that, and it absolutely ruins what you're trying to do.
That's
not the way to do it.
That's an honest answer. Thank you, How does the Minister ensure that compliance inspections for Jersey's independent schools are robust and aligned with the standards expected of government-provided schools?
When you say independent schools, do you mean the non-at-all Skates-funded schools? The ones that are entirely independent?
And the other ones, yes.
The other. Well, we have Bowley and FCJ, I believe, use the independent school subject, but they have been involved.
Bowley and FCJ have our Jersey Standards for Independent Schools and the Jersey School Review Framework. Reports published online on gov.je.
Right.
De La Salle have gone down the process of becoming a British Schools Overseas, registering as British Schools Overseas, and engaging with the Independent Schools Inspectorate inspections. Their reports are published. The Independent Schools Inspectorate has 2 levels of inspection. The compliance one, which is absolutely in line with our Jersey standards. They are the mirror image of each other. And then they also have a quality, which is in line with England's standards and ours. It is similar to ours in Jersey School Review level.
Okay.
Those reports are published, and we've got links to them on gov.je as well.
Okay.
That's the
But all schools are welcome to be part of the Jersey Review Framework, and what I hope is that the validity of it, the quality of it, and the positivity of it to help schools improve is recognised, and they will come on board. And
They'll encourage them to come on board.
but there are lots of inspection, if you want to call it that, with systems available for independent schools as well. And I think that they are very keen to have those to show their qualities, to be quite frank.
Well, as independent schools.
Yeah.
Minister, in terms of the impact on school improvement, what evidence is there that the first cycle of school reviews has contributed to measurable improvements in teaching quality, leadership, pupil outcomes?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because that's the sort of overall question of all of those. I think what we've seen, Matthew, the measurable improvements, do you want to just talk for a couple of those?
I think there's been significant improvements, not only in the common language of leaders' self-evaluation, school improvement planning processes. It's enhanced curriculum delivery, the quality of teaching and learning we've seen across our schools. It's given a structure for schools to be supported when there have been challenges, and there's been a systematic approach against the previous handbook and how that works. There is a significant improvement that we can see in when the Jersey School Review first came through in 2017-18. Schools received an unpublished pilot, all Government of Jersey schools. The comparison from then until the published later reviews, which finished, 4 schools were so I only used the inspection word, my apologies, 4 schools were reviewed, before the pandemic and had published reports.
Yes, we've
and then after the pandemic, from 2022 onwards, we completed the cycle. The significant improvement, and part of because that was unpublished and it was pilot work, we can't put that in the public domain, but the significant improvement on individual schools is notable. And that largely falls in the standards of leadership, the standards of the quality of teaching, and the improvements and the pockets of improvements, and there's significant examples of improvement in more inclusive teaching has been picked up too, across the board. And the SEND review has also picked up on that and saying that schools are on that journey. So
I think just one other thing I would add, as we move forward and we are serious about schools collaborating across schools a lot more, and schools are keen to do that, and with our demographics, that will be absolutely necessary. I think the review framework will help with that as well, because that openness, that, you know, the identification of good practice, the identification of places where a school will say, hey, look, we've seen that really good practice, we want a part of that as well. That's the way forward. Not to say you've failed, we're going to punish you. That doesn't work. This is about, again, realising and enabling people, the professionalism of our teachers. Who, I've said this before, highly qualified, highly committed individuals to their job. You might go through some challenging times in a long career, of course you will, but then we need to support staff.
I have some questions now about recruitment and retention of teaching staff.
Yeah.
Can the Minister confirm whether all teaching and support staff vacancies have been filled for the start of the were filled for the start of the September 25 school year? And if not, what contingency plans were in place?
I think there were, I can't find the number now, it's 2.
This is
What
the
page is
numbers
that
you've
on?
got in page
35.
35.
Currently
These
have
are
two
current.
vacancies.
These are current vacancies, Minister.
Current vacancies are 2 for teachers and lecturers, and 15 for support staff teaching assistants, which are the same thing by a different name across our schools. We're recruiting one of those other support staff, which might be office staff or other back
correct.
staff in schools. There are 4 across our estate,
So we currently have 21 vacancies.
so 21, but 2 of those are teachers and lecturers. I won't say what
21,500
subjects, I don't think that's fair.
How is
I can
that?
tell you after.
How is that managed then? Because
Well, there will be a recruitment process. We've not had a huge issue with them, so they may be being covered in other areas as we're going along, but there will continue to be a recruitment process. Look, let's be honest about it, it is difficult to recruit still. It's getting increasingly difficult in other jurisdictions, particularly in the UK, because a lot less people are training as teachers and the jobs are becoming more difficult. So actually only having 2 vacancies is quite remarkable at this stage, but I think we can deal with those as well. And they are a very specific area of the curriculum that we want to address.
15 support staff, you
Yeah,
mentioned.
that's about, I think that's because we've increased the numbers of teaching assistants that we want in schools as much as anything.
In terms of supporting
I
children,
know
particularly
that's
with
fine. Because, I mean, we talk a lot about the increase in public service sector, but a lot of that increase is frontline teaching assistants that are helping our children in schools. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
190 something over the last few years.
And in the last 2 years, our local teach training programme has had 100% employment following that.
Yeah.
So in 2023, 17 trainees went straight into work for September 23-24.
Yeah.
In 2024, 11 qualified and went straight into jobs in Jersey schools. So that's a steady, that's a big part of supporting
Yeah.
on the ground. And some of the vacancies that would be in place in September wouldn't necessarily be a long-term vacancy. So the parental leave cycle, you might have a colleague who's taking 8 weeks in September, but who'll be returning in November. You wouldn't do a long-term recruitment for that. So that's where the supply agencies and local supply staff come into play.
Okay. Has there been any trends noticed in changes into issues with recruitment and retention across the
I
schools?
think we've had a relative stability, if you can ever have stability in the teaching profession,
in the last
because
few
you
years.
get movement, you've got shifts. I think I was going to mention the on Ireland teacher training programme, and that recruitment has been successful. We are in a better position than a lot of places would be, but we are always conscious that can change quickly, and therefore be aware of it. I have to say, we've had nearly 2 years now without any form of industrial action. We've had positive contributions with the unions. We've got something in the government plan for the first time ever, actual money to try and do something about time in schools. And I think all of those things do build up to improve what we're doing. And I hope we can move forward and keep that profession going because of that.
Okay, is there any sort of monitoring done of the workforce stability across schools?
Yes, we do.
Yes, I mean, I don't know what the unit of stability is, but
We regularly monitor vacancies, gaps in schools. But as the Minister has said, they have been lower than they have been previously, going back about 3 or 4 years when they were a lot higher. We're more than happy to share with you the trends if that's easy. I don't have them in front of me, but we can share that information with you.
So
they're not
overall,
alarming trends.
overall seems quite stable.
Yeah, but again, I will always say we will keep watching. We
We
always
have
keep
to say they're the
watching.
headline figures as well. There will be pressures in schools, though. We
Yeah,
have
of
to,
course there will
just
be.
recognising within, and
Yeah.
teachers covering other subjects and so on, and there will be pressures. However, the overall number of vacancies has come down.
So there's sort of overall stability, but is anything monitored and analysed at the level of an individual school to see if there might be issues at a particular school?
Yeah, we would keep track of staff leaving, and because it's important to understand why. It may be that one school has a number of staff that retire at the same time. You need to be prepared for that. You should be planning for that because there's a lot goes on with retirement. I will go back to when I was a head of department around May time. It was very stressful because you were sort of being really nice to your staff, saying you're not going to go to so-and-so. I saw a vacancy. You're not going to leave, are you? Because you've got to recruit as well. So there's always that is going to happen as well.
Okay, so when that is monitored, that is noticed, what happens if it seems apparent that a high number is leaving?
Well, the first thing would be you would be in contact with the head teachers and the leadership of that school because you would want to have some idea as to why and get a clear picture of what's happening.
Yeah, just a good an example of that has been we've had a secondary school that's been particularly affected by parental leave, which then puts pressure on their staff team. We become aware of that and we support the school to put measures into place.
Okay. We just heard about the teacher training locally. So what is the current uptake of the Jersey Graduate Teacher Training Programme, and are there any subject areas where vacancies remain unfilled, which have been particularly challenging?
In terms of subject areas, we said there's 2 vacancies. I don't really want to say what the subject area is. It's not physics. Let's put it that way.
Not usually is.
Yeah, that's physics teachers are like hen's teeth. They're really, really rare, difficult to
Stay
find.
with the subject areas, couldn't you?
Oh, I can do. I think one of them's a business studies teacher.
Sorry, I thought are you asking about teacher training vacancies?
Oh, sorry, teacher training vacancies.
I was
Apologies,
asking
I've
about the
gone back to-
Jersey Graduate Teacher Training Programme,
Yeah.
and if there is any areas of subject areas particularly challenging, but also,
Yeah.
as you mentioned about those particular vacancies, you said business studies.
That's it. There's one business.
One business
There's one
studies.
unfilled business role on island at the moment.
Yeah, and it says there's 2 teacher lecturers, so there's another one.
The other one is the ongoing advert for supply. So we
Oh,
always
yes,
have,
yes, sorry.
So we're always available to recruit people who want to join the supply agency. So those 2 vacancies, one is supply, and one is for a business studies. We don't recruit by subject for the JGTP. We do open recruitment for any colleague on island who'd like to be a teacher, and then the different routes will be available depending on subject need on island. So if we had 10 people apply to be art teachers, for example, that wouldn't be fair to recruit 10 people to teach art because there wouldn't be 10 jobs on island for 10 art teachers. So we survey schools every year and try to have as good an understanding as possible of vacancies that they anticipate advertising in the next year. And then we also target, so we know that there are subjects which are harder to recruit to, and those are the subjects which have bursaries allocated to them. So if you applied to train to be a teacher of science or maths, and you had the right graduate qualifications for that route, then that's likely to be recruited. Subjects which are less frequently creating vacancies, we're very cautious, we're careful to balance. We also recruit for primary. So of the cohort this year, it's 60-40 split, secondary, primary. It runs in roughly that sort of space, 60-40, 75, yeah.
60 primary?
Secondary.
Right, thank you.
And on a small island, we will always have to make those sorts of decisions.
Economy of scale.
Because that's, I think that's a good analogy. If you train 10 art teachers, you have to be honest and say there will not be 10 vacancies.
It's the challenge of core subjects versus the foundation subjects.
Yeah.
And because we do have quite good stability in our schools. So if you get a job as an art teacher in a school, quite commonly somebody might stay there for 15, 20 years. So it'll be a long time. And a big secondary school may only need 2 or 3 art teachers. So then it may be 10 or 15 years before an art vacancy comes up in a secondary school, even across all of our secondary school. So it's about creating that pool of talent.
And-
We encourage colleagues to look at being able to teach more than one subject for that reason. So quite often they'll do
gonna
a
say-
second subject.
I was going to
So
say,
they can
and
have more flex.
those conversations will happen at the beginning,
Yeah.
and the realism of, if I want to go and say, well, I'd like to be a teacher of philosophy, I'll probably be told you're unlikely to get a job doing that here, and I might have to make my decision. And
Yeah,
it
but
probably
you
won't
might
be-
qualify in English and philosophy,
Yeah.
or RE and philosophy, because religious education would be across the piece, and then philosophy A level might be a subject that you could teach
Yeah.
in one or 2 schools. So it is quite a balancing act, and what feels like a shortage can simply be that there isn't a locally qualified candidate at the moment on Island waiting for a history job or a, and so that's where the balance gets quite
I
subtle.
suppose we're a small community.
We are a small community, and people aren't moving cross county boundaries to come in and out of schools and colleges.
Okay, thank you for that. I now have some questions about early years. So, Minister, what steps are being taken by the department to ensure that nurseries and childminders are prepared to deliver the 15 hours of funded childcare per week from 2026?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to be very careful in my wording so that it's clear. I know you do press releases after this. Last time I spoke to a panel, I don't believe that what I said was accurately reported, so let me be really clear. The 15 hours of paid 2 to 3 nursery hours, at £11 an hour, is being prepared, has to go through the government plan. We have had really good communications with the childminders who are on board, and the final stages of how that will work is happening with them. I'm surprised that hasn't happened with nurseries. We developed the rate with a member of staff, an officer from economic development, so that they were purposefully independent from the department, so they were looking at it with the Jersey Early Years Association in conjunction with them. The rate that was initially said was £10.54. We've said 24, sorry, we said £11, so that there was a slight upgrade to that to encourage and sustainability. I think that is a fair rate, and that's the rate going forward. We can't move any further on that in terms of it being like the NEF at the moment, although the door is still open for nurseries to, some nurseries have accepted that, to step up and say we'd like to be part of that, and we hope that happens. However, we are working at pace and actively to create a system where we can pay that direct to parents. So nurseries can just carry on doing what they're doing, provide the hours at the rate they're providing the hours, and then parents can claim that money back. And it will be behind. In arrears, that's the phrase I'm looking for. But it will, if we get this through the Assembly and we have the system that we have, which is ready to go nearly, be available in terms of paid from January, but in arrears. There is something called the public finance law, so we have to prove the use of that money, and that's important. So we are in a place where this can be happening, with all the little bumps in the road. I think we spent a couple of months talking with the Jersey Early Years Association developing a rate, and that sort of put us back 2 months. If we were now in a position where that was being supported more widely, I think we would be moving faster, but we have to deal with what we have. And so therefore we will deal with what we have, and the underlying principle to this is to enable parents to get some help with their nursery. And can I just say one more thing, which is really, really important, was reported really badly. This is 15 hours. If you have a 20-hour job, you pay for 5 hours, you still get the 15 hours. If you have a 35-hour job, you get paid for 15 and you get 20 hours.
Because we can come to that later.
Yeah.
So I was asking about what steps you are taking. So just to make sure that this is accurately reported,
Yeah.
you were talking about how you're working at pace,
Yeah.
that the plans are for it to be paid to parents directly.
Well, that is our, if you like, plan that if we're going to initiate this from January, it's the only way forward because we haven't had the wider buy-in to something we thought we'd agreed that we would have wanted. So this is another option that we have.
Okay.
And that would be a trial for the first year before we engage things.
The Minister, you used an acronym. I think for the public, we should explain what the NEF is for the.
Yeah,
for the
this is
reporting.
the Nursery Education Fund is the 3 to 4 year old fund. That is a fund that's been set up for some years, which is paid directly to the nurseries for 30 hours for 3 to 4 year olds. We could have, to be quite frank, had a similar system for the 2 to 3 year olds, but there seems to be some issue over some of that. So one of the other options we have is to pay directly to parents.
Thank you for that explanation.
Sorry,
Is the
thank you.
15-hour provision intended as a first step towards expanding from the childcare hours in the future?
Well, I can't speak for future governments, but if it was me, then yes, exactly, it would be. I think it is an identified need in our society. This is worth £6,127 a year. I think that's the correct figure. If I'm out by a few pounds, please forgive me, for a family with a child of 2 to 3 year old in nursery. That is significant money. Of course, it would be great to extend that. I will say, and Deputy Miles, you know, because you've been, as you would call it, in the big chair around COM, getting money out of Treasury is not the easiest thing on earth. I thought that would be the most difficult part. We have money to start this for 15 hours. Term time only, and I think yes, it is a first step, but let's get that ingrained first.
Okay, so do you think that for those parents or a parent who might not be in work at the moment, do you think this will be sufficient to support them to transition back into work if that's what they're planning to do?
Well, at the moment there's nothing, and this is 15 hours. So yes, I believe it is the first step in supporting them back into work. It could be, I mean, we've had, well, we won't go into some of the, well, we've had some very positive comments about that, but yes, I do believe it will be a first step to help people back into work. Would it be better if it was 30 hours? Probably, although I think we then have issues around have we got capacity for those hours? So there will always be some issues found with it. This is the first step. It's funded, we have a plan to deliver it, and we know it can be delivered.
You've talked about the plan now to pay parents directly. Which is the question I was going to ask you about. How will that be done? Do you know?
It would have to be in arrears, and there would have to be some checks and balances put in place. But there are simple things that we're working on now, which will be an online application. It would require a social security number of the child, because they would have those. It would need some sort of receipt from the nursery provider, but I'm sure they're provided anyway. I mean, if you're paying money, you want a receipt for what you're doing, and then an application would be made. Somebody would have to prove that's the case, and then money would be paid. There is a way of doing that. It will be in arrears, but during the first year, we would work on a system to get that to work. And if we continue that, we hope that by the second year, by the 2nd January of 2027, we would have something that we can develop over that year, or whatever government's here can develop over that year, to have it in place to deliver that in advance. I mean, you know, obviously it would have been easier probably to just pay us with the NEF, but we do need to move this forward.
Okay, so how does the 1.5 million in targeted support for children with additional needs, how will that be allocated, and what criteria will be issued to identify children who qualify for this additional
Yeah, do you want to take some of that down?
Of course.
Yeah.
So I can announce that we'll be formally working with the Childcare Trust on this after a comprehensive procurement activity. So we're just in the process now of working with them over what will be called the contract specifications. So what mechanism will be used for eligibility. But we've got a lot of this that happens already, so this is not starting from scratch. So working with the JCCT, the Jersey Childcare Trust, we already have a number of mechanisms by which we can identify and then help assess eligible children and families. We just want to scale up with this. We also, as part of that development of service specifications, want to try and move towards a more level playing field in terms of how you get support when you're very young, because this can affect then the transition, let's say, from a non-school nursery into a school nursery. We want a nice smooth transition. That requires, therefore, some consistency in terms of how support is identified and provided. The main things are we've identified a supplier to work with. We are well advanced in developing those specifications. We have more money to invest, approved already, so that's not subject to government plan. That's already approved, and we will have by the end of this year those mechanisms in place. But effectively, think about it as scaling up what we already do with the Jersey Childcare Trust and moving towards that greater universality of support for those children with additional needs across school and non-school.
And that's really important. I've seen that organisation working within nurseries across our own that already happens. It is scaling up. I just also mentioned that there is the £0.7 million investment in speech and language therapy following a successful pilot with ECOF, which is a really successful thing in their schools, and £0.6 million to continue successful pilot programmes that we've had in our schools. Duo Dinky is the play and learn, etc., which have had real impacts for children. So this is a good blend of provision across need.
Can I just clarify about the 1.5 million? You say that you've contracted Jersey Childcare Trust. So at the moment, Jersey Childcare Trust are doing the provision up at Doverne for the 2-year-olds. It's the pilot. Is the intention then that Jersey Childcare Trust will take over the pilot at Trinity and everywhere else?
If I could separate them, so the pilots Play and Learn and Duo Dinkies that are providing childcare for targeted support, they continue separate to that 1.5 million.
Okay.
So the 1.5 million then is around inclusion provision across all settings.
Thank you.
So some of that will go into schools. That will become a head teacher's budget to invest
So
appropriately.
it's an extension of what they're already doing on a smaller. Okay.
Some of that then go into third party, so private sector or third sector nurseries. But we're treating and funding the pilot totally separately, and that continues because that's been very successful, as Melissa has set out. The 1.5 that work with JCCT, which isn't 1.5 to JCCT.
No.
That's
but it enables. Yeah. Okay,
So
I
thanks
understand
for asking that, because I
you.
don't think I helped clarify that at all,
Okay,
but
thank
thank you.
So that will help children, these children with additional needs to settle into more spaces.
Indeed.
Okay. What mechanisms will be used to monitor the impact of the early years funding on families? How will that be monitored over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, part of it is uptake, but of the 15 hours that we're offering, over 80% of families are already in nurseries, so we know that they're there, and this is just direct help for those families and those costs. We have some really interesting comments that were made around that online. I don't look online, but other people do. Talking about how that is absolutely, the cost is crippling. This will help them enormously, etc., etc. So the uptake is one of the issues. Other monitoring areas.
We've got island outcome indicators such as percentage of children aged 2 reaching developmental milestones, so monitoring that, and also percentage of children aged 4 to 5 achieving or exceeding the expected level of development in all areas of learning within the EYFS.
But part of this is to support families as well. This programme is more about those families and those children, because families are struggling, and that direct help, I think, will be, especially when you have a 2 to 3 year old. I've been there. It's really, really difficult.
And the monitoring, will it look at equitable outcomes for children from different backgrounds as well, how that might be affecting?
That's what the island.
Those milestones would always be analysed through the lens of different pupil groups.
Yeah, okay.
So Minister,
That's a very important question. Thank you for that.
EYFS, could again you determine that acronym for us?
Early years foundation.
Yes, foundation stage.
Early years.
Nursery years
Thank
and
you.
reception.
And can I just clarify as well, that this 15 hours of funding is not specifically allocated to parents who are already in work?
No. It will be because I think there are a number of things there. It's about access to quality nursery care. It may encourage parents back into work. They may have other children as well. It may take some of it. It may help in terms of well-being. There are all sorts of reasons. But I can say that over 80% of children are already in nursery, and it is likely, very likely, that those parents will be in work. So we are targeting widely, but I think that is the right thing to do. I have to say the biggest risk to this is probably the assembly, because we have to vote on it, and misinformation. So that's why I'm really careful in what I'm saying about, you know, this emphasis on the 20 hours. And to some extent, that's a red herring, a large red herring, actually. We're paying for 15 hours. This fits. We can do it. We've got the money to do it. It can work. We know we've had a few bumps in the road. That's fine. We're up to it. I respect that completely. But we want to try and get this in place for. So at least from January, parents will know there's some provision there. If it's you know, retrospective, so to speak, or what was the phrase? In arrears. I can't remember that phrase. Then so be it. But I think parents will still appreciate that. In arrears. I'm going to write that down.
Just conscious of time, so I'll just ask these very quickly. About higher education funding. Can you just tell us the steps that you're taking to ensure that the HE funding remains financially accessible for students from low and middle income families?
In terms of, well, we haven't changed anything in terms of the means testing. You can earn up to £210,000.
Yes, around about that, yeah.
Thank you. I've learnt. Sorry, and still get some help with tuition fees. I think that's very, you know, it's generous. We've made a lot of progress as soon as I took the job. P12 came in, which did determine a great deal on the things I had to do. The amended version, so we've completed the work on distance learning, on updating thresholds, because we've done that by inflation. Notice inflation's gone down in the UK today, so that's quite interesting. And the tuition grant, we've looked at the research on the sliding scale, and the answer is that's not the best thing to do, so I don't want to do that. We've reviewed the threshold for relevant assets and assessed the viability of student loans. Student loans, I still firmly believe, are not viable on this island. We're an offshore island. Chasing them would be difficult. It would be as much to actually implement them as it would be the money that you're giving out. And I don't think that's a good use of money.
Has there been any further discussions with Student Loan UK to try and allow Channel Islands Jersey students to access the student loan company in the UK?
No, there's always going to be an issue with that because you're offshore, and I don't think they can chase students here and vice versa.
Okay, so, well, they can chase people who work here for the money because you've got UK teachers who are here that are still paying off UK people who work here who are still paying off UK loans.
Okay, yeah. I personally don't think that's a good idea at all.
So one of the issues that we're hearing is obviously with the system that we have at the moment, even though these students are adults, they're dependent on their parents. When you have parents who are unwilling or unable to fund, we have a certain cohort of students who are actually unable to access higher education because they cannot get a loan. Have the department had any thoughts about how that might be addressed?
Yeah, we have some ongoing work on independent students, which I think we will have by the end of the year to define on. We've looked at that really, really closely.
So
Tony's done some really good work on that.
That would require a change of definition of independent student.
Yes, it would.
A change in a working interpretation of a financially independent student. That's not described in the law, so we have a policy of how we've defined that, and the changes that we have reviewed our working definition.
And does the department keep any data or have any information on the number of Jersey students who are unable to access higher education because we don't have loan arrangements?
Well, first of all, I think you've defined the outcome of the question there yourself. I'm not sure that is entirely the reason why they might not be able to. That would be one option. If they had access to loans, perhaps they would be able to access higher education because they could take a loan out, okay, like they do in the UK.
But does the department hold any data on people coming to
how
you?
I don't believe so.
I don't know how we would hold that
coming to you
data.
to say, I want to go to university, but I need to be funded.
There isn't a tick box that student clients have where they've had a conversation with someone and they said, because of your decision to fund me based on my parents' income, I now can't go. Because that conversation may not always happen. I don't.
There is an appeal system. There is an appeal system though, and we would know about that. And we work as hard as we can to try and help young people. So, for example, the work we've done on distance learning will help as well. I don't think those numbers are large, and we would do everything we can to try and help. But there is a reality to the funding that it isn't a bottomless pit, and we have to have some rules around it.
What is the government doing to review the level of financial support for the maintenance grants, given the cost of living?
Yeah, the maintenance grant and clinical increased by 2.5%. Income thresholds were increased by 5.2% in September 2025. So the maintenance grant in terms of inflation rates in the UK at a set time.
Okay.
So we are increasing by inflation.
And you're increasing the tuition fee in line with what the tuition fee?
Yes. We can't tell you what that is yet because they haven't announced what it is yet. But as soon as they do,
but it will be an automatic increase.
we will
to
have to.
cover.
We will have to, and that is the right thing to do. I mean, it'd be good if we didn't have to, but we do.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that reassures parents actually. So thanks for asking that. Yeah.
Vocational learning, Minister.
Yes.
What assessment has the Minister made of the impact that the planned phasing out of BTECs in the UK will have on Jersey students, and what steps are being taken to ensure continuity and choice in vocational education?
Yeah, it's a really good question. An enormous amount of work has been going on, and I want to thank particularly Highlands and Holy, who have been working together really well on that. And I know we've had talks at Curriculum Council. There's been discussions in the background, with discussions with the UK. I've spoken to the UK Minister actually when we were, one of the things about attending events like conferences is to sit and have a lunch with the UK Minister and make the point that Jersey exists and so does Guernsey, and we are using their qualifications. You have to think about that. I think they've rolled back a bit on BTECs in the last few months. The alternatives, we're interested to look at the way that V levels are being introduced.
That was my next question.
T level, we can talk about V levels if you want, and at this stage it's unknown what the government, what they're looking at running a consultation, design, implementation and consultation until January 2026, and they are due to be phased in from September 2027 with full implementation by 2030. And it's expected to be regulated the same way as A levels, but we do not know the way they will work. My concern, if I can put that first, is that if they are similar to T levels, we cannot use T levels here. They are an English qualification, we cannot use them. There are also obstacles to us using them because of the nature of their work placements, which are very, very heavily laden. And to be quite frank, there is some evidence, it was suggested to me, that they work well in big cities in the UK, but that's about the only place they're working well.
Rather than rural environments.
It's a real challenge for T levels as well. So we will need to react carefully to that. There are things called AAQs, which we can use gradually. But all I would say is we are absolutely on top of the changes that are there, but there are some unknowns that we can't deal with at the moment. BTECs will continue in the next few years. They are not redundant. They're not being got rid of. They're just not being funded as much because the funds are going to all these other things. And if you don't fund a qualification, eventually it will die off.
Yes, indeed. I think all of those have now been answered on that particular subject. School infrastructure, if I may.
Yep.
How is the department ensuring that school facilities remain safe, fit for purpose, and align with modern teaching and learning needs, including digital infrastructure and accessibility?
Well, in terms of, there's an ongoing programme of repair and work that's going on in schools, that's going on all the time. Every time I've been in the school, there's some work going on. The digital infrastructure is a challenge. Okay. It absolutely, it has been since I arrived on the island, to be quite frank, and it has been something that we've been pushing for a long, long time. That is partly because of the way it was set up initially some years ago, it was being separate from the other infrastructure digitally on the island. So there's always been this problem of not being able to access government infrastructure. So yes, work needs to continue on that, and that is going to be a challenge for us. It does work in schools, but I think it could be better. I mean, I could flippantly say there's a lot less use of the Wi-Fi because children aren't accessing their phones on it at the moment, but I don't think that's going to make much difference, to be quite frank. We have a corporate landlord, which is Jersey Property Holdings, and they've been carrying out their works, and I think our relationship with them has been improving, and they've been really cooperative with us recently.
The Jersey Capital Investment Fund is if it's approved in the government's proposed budget, Will any future developments for major educational or school building projects be taken forward by that vehicle?
Yes.
Can we specify, Minister?
Well, I think if we are going to look at the building of a new Highlands College, that's certainly in the plan, and I think that could be supported. Also, obviously the school at Gas Place and the development of Rouge Bouillon. I mean, shall I go over the argument with Gas Place again and how important it is to our schools? I think you already know about that.
we're
So
okay
those
with
are the
that.
major projects, just to put it quickly.
Okay. And so what benefits will that have for sites?
Well, when we look at, there's a changing world of post-16 education. I will be publishing soon the report that came from myself and Deputy Owls, who's not worked very well today, that's what I know, consultation with young people about post-16. We went into every single school and educational establishment, and Tanya, you were there for some of them as well. We'll be publishing that report. The nature of post-16 is going to be, I think, an issue going forward. How does it fit together? How do we access it? I think that young people have a particular view. Yeah, but I don't want to spoil the report because it's their report, and I think it's really powerful, actually, and I congratulate them on that. So therefore, new facilities will help us to build that. So a new facility for Highlands College will make it incorporate that vocational element of education, really give it the importance that it needs and will future-proof it, yeah, so that we know where we're going with it. I think it also bring together that false dichotomy between vocational and academic education. I think it is very difficult to find something that's entirely vocational or entirely academic. I've never thought that's possible, to be quite frank.
And what challenges, if any, do you think that structure could have for the entire sites system? The challenges.
Well, let me put it this way: if we don't build the Gas Place school, we're going to have real problems in the centre of St Helier with our schools, and we're going to miss a massive opportunity to build a purpose-built school with community access from day one, which will be massively beneficial to that area. If we don't do something about a new Highlands campus, we're going to be flooding money into those buildings to constantly try and repair them, which I don't think is adequate. We need to get on with the build. So I think these things will have structural effects on us if we don't, in the long term, and get involved. But the investment fund is the vehicle for that. Just saying, feasibility studies are happening through that investment fund already. So it is moving at a pace. And so it's the first time, I mean, I can't talk about them now because there's a lot of work to be done there, but a lot of work has happened. So that the feasibility of these projects is real and is happening already.
Excellent. Thank you for your honesty.
Yeah, if I can just add to some of that. When you mentioned, when we discussed the Jersey Capital Investment Fund and you mentioned Rouge Bouillon School, can you give us some information about plans for that?
Well, we're talking about the upgrading of Rouge Bouillon School in the coming years. I mean, how we manage that rebuild and also in conjunction, as I'm sure you know, with the police and fire and ambulance. So there is a project to be undertaken now, which I think goes across ministry. So I think that's what we're talking about there. But with new facilities, it would give us the opportunity to perhaps, help with that build as well.
Spread the load.
And with I think with the changing demographics, and I'm concerned that people are going on about the changing demographics. I'm not entirely sure it's going to affect the centre of St Helier and town schools as much as others, to be quite frank. So we have to look at that as well. I can't give you details on Rouge Bouillon at the moment from that investment fund. It's very early on. Sorry about that.
There's been work going on about upgrading Rouge Bouillon School over quite a few years now, hasn't there?
And a lot of work has happened there, to be fair.
Are there any plans at all about extending the amount of space in the school, for example?
I think in terms of the, we need, as the Minister said, in relation to the fire and rescue site and looking at the overall site, but the building itself, although the site isn't big enough for a two-form entry school, the building itself doesn't help. It's very inefficient in its spread. So the challenge will be with Rouge Bouillon is rebuilding a school on a site where it's currently located. So it's how we would do that to make the most efficient use of the space around for outside play space for young people.
Yeah, and which is why I think the Gas Place site, which is clear and can be started, is such an important unblocker in the whole lot of this.
Okay, thank you. I think unless you've got any more questions, we've reached the end of that hearing.
We're letting him on by a minute, Chair.
Do you want me to-
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.